Hello and welcome. My name's Pete Horsley. I am the founder of Remarkable. Remarkable is a division of Cerebral Palsy Alliance, and we have great partners: iCare Foundation, Microsoft, and also Telstra. Remarkable's mission is really to harness the power of innovation and technology to see barriers to inclusion broken down for people with disability. The primary way that we do that is through an accelerator program, and that accelerator program takes early stage startups that are creating technology and supports founders as they begin that journey. So far, over the last 5 years, we've supported 32 startups, and those startups have been able to raise over $24 million in capital and grants. They've created around about 480 full-time equivalent jobs and served over 40,000 customers as well. Today I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. I'm calling from Guringai land, and I want to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. And it's on the land that each of our speakers are speaking from as well. We need to understand and pay our respects to the elders who have cared for this land and who were the original innovators in our land. And I also want to pay my respect to advocates for disability rights as well. It's on their shoulders that we stand today as well, seeing the progress that we've been able to make around disability inclusion so far. Welcome to International Day for People with Disability as well. Today's conversation is about seeing the ability in disability, and it's part of a series of webinars that we do called Remarkable Insights. And Remarkable Insights really tries to see how we can create an inclusive now. What are the insights that we can gain so that we can create an inclusive now? Technological innovation is advancing at a rapid pace, and we've seen that even more so this year during the global pandemic. And we want to ask the question, well, who is being left behind in that? Are everyone benefiting from that in an equal way? And so Remarkable Insights is trying to help us all gain those insights in how we can make sure that the advances in technology are benefiting everyone. So for anyone who wants to join the conversation, you can look on our social media. Our handle is @RemarkableTech. If you're on Instagram, it's @Remarkable_tech. And we'd love you to use the hashtag of Remarkable Insights. Today we have live AI captioning. So down in the bottom, you'll see there's an option for closed caption. You can open that. Also, you can open a separate window if you'd prefer to see that. Also like to welcome Kerry Lakeman, who is our Auslan interpreter. Welcome, Kerry. It's great to have you with us. We'll be recording this event and it will be made available post today so that you can forward this on to other people that you might think need to watch this particular webinar. But make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. There's lots of things on there. We want to know who's actually viewing this webinar. We've got lots of people joining us today, and in previous webinars, we've actually had people from all over the world. So if you're comfortable right now, down the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little chat icon. And we'd love if you could jump in there and you could click on that and put in where you're kind of viewing from, so that we can see a range of where people are coming from. Daryl's already done it. He's viewing from New York. Welcome, Daryl. Great to see you. Dixie from Durragland in Penrith. Amazing. Western Australia, Brisbane, Tasmania, Bondi, nice and close. Brizzy, fantastic. Oh, it's sensational to see. Great. Oh, Africa, amazing. Adelaide, that's sensational. So great to see where everyone is calling from, and even our panelists we have kind of calling from a number of different places today. So it's so good to have you all with us. So our panel today, our Remarkable Insights panel, we're really blessed to have an incredible panel on International Day for People with Disability. We're joined, each of these panelists are really trying to challenge the way that disability is being viewed. And so today we're joined by Jerusha, a neuroscientist advocating for greater acceptance of medical students and doctors with disabilities. We have Tanika, a regular mum, she likes to describe herself, who is sharing the real and raw side to autism spectrum disorder with her podcast, Autism Our Way, No Shame in Sharing. Andrew, a host of a podcast shining a bright light on sex and disability, which aims to explore parts of the disabled experience that we don't often hear about. And also Rachel, telling positive stories of neurodiverse employees in the workplace and really helping to unleash the neurodivergent potential in workplaces. So it is great to have you all with us. As I mentioned at the top of the podcast, or the top of the webinar, that today is International Day for People with Disability. Might not be quite there for Daryl, our friend in New York, just yet, but it will be soon. And December the 3rd is a day that is set aside by the United Nations every year to really celebrate internationally the people with disability and that as an identity. It aims to really increase public awareness, understanding. Ultimately, they talk about we want to increase acceptance of people. I kind of find that term a little bit troubling, but that's okay. That's what they've talked about, and really, but to celebrate achievements and contributions of people with disability. And this year's International Day for People with Disability theme in Australia, anyway, is seeing the ability in disability. So I want to get into this. So Andrew, I want to start with you. Our use of language is obviously important when it comes to disability. And I know that there's been a slow change in the kind of discourse. We started with kind of handicapped as kind of the one of the original terms that we were using, to a person, to disabled, and then to person first language. That's where we say a person with cerebral palsy. But now emerging, there's more identity first language. So particularly we're seeing this in the autistic and deaf communities, where you'd be an autistic person and want to have that as a strong part of your identity. When we first discussed this topic, when we said, what are the things that you want to talk about in terms of seeing the ability in disability, you immediately said, before we talk about ability in disability, can we talk about the disability in disability? So can you tell us what you meant by that, please?
Yeah, sure. And it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm coming in from Toronto, Canada, so it's cold and snowy here, and I'm super jealous for you starting summer. But thank you so much for having me today. When I first saw that, I cringed because I was like, oh, okay. Because what happens when I see a lot of people saying ability over disability, what they're doing is in my opinion, they're erasing a culture of people who disability is not necessarily just impairments or disabilities. It's actually its own culture and it's its own community. And so when I see people trying to connect with disabled people by saying, "Oh, we can talk about people of all abilities," and it's like, okay, well, no, can you just say disability? It's showing people that saying the word disability is not a bad word. It's not something we should be afraid to talk about. And so in all of my work as a consultant and the work I do with Handy and the work I just do on my own, I make sure to always use the word disabled so that it becomes something we can have in popular culture that isn't scary and icky. And so that's why I jumped on it right away, because I was like, can we talk about the fact that being disabled is something that we can be proud of? It doesn't mean we can't be frustrated by our disabilities and have moments where we don't like them, but it doesn't mean we should erase it entirely from our existence, because many of us with disabilities can't hide our disabilities. We can't pass as non-disabled. And even those of us who can, why should we? We should be finding ways to incorporate disability into our lives. And part of the way we do that is by using the language that's available to us, and disabled is a great way to do that.
And this might be kind of take us into a little bit of an M-rated territory, but I know that the way that you like to refer to yourself is a queer and a crip, so you talk quite a lot about sex and disability. Why is it important for you as an advocate to be talking about sex in particular?
Because we're not talking about it enough in terms of disability. It's been erased from consciousness. If we think of disabled people as sexual, They are inherently thought of as asexual, not having a sexuality, not being able to go on dates, not being able to have relationships. And so, it's something that me as a 36-year-old person hasn't been able to really experience a lot of those things because of the stigma around sex and disability. So for me as a queer disabled person, I feel like it's particularly important because in queer spaces, I'm not given the time of day. So I was like, well, if no one's going to talk about it, I will.
That's awesome. And Rachel, I know that you also like language and words. You're a researcher, you're a journalist, you're a poet as well. And when you hear the phrase "see the ability in disability," we kind of get the intent, right? But you said in a campaign released by the Australian Human Rights Commission that was released today about invisible disabilities, that the most powerful thing to do is to ask people, because you all have stories to tell. So as someone with an invisible disability, what would you like people to know about your story?
Someone like me living with autism, ADHD, or identity first, I also consider myself autistic ADHD. I just feel like it's fighting against a lot of stereotypes and prejudices from people who just don't even understand what the condition is like unless they're actually living in it. It feels like if you're able to pass as apparently able-bodied, like, actually hold down jobs, like I've had, 5 years in journalism and legal marketing, and, because I'm not on a disability pension, apparently I should be okay. But I'm like, most days I can't even get out of bed properly. I find cooking pasta feels like a nuclear physics experiment, and so it sort of feels like the basic things that people take for granted, all the executive function, day-to-day stuff of sequencing activities that are boring to me, just a real struggle unless I have the additional help. And I guess in today's Australian Human Rights Commission campaign in this invisible disability, what I really wanted to make super clear, I guess, was that, for example, autism is funded by the NDIS, but ADHD by itself isn't, and yet it is clearly a disability that really affects a lot of people. And even then, it's split as well. People kind of go, no, but it's a superpower. I'm like, yes, but let's not erase everyone else's experiences, that it's also a disability and a pain in the ass sometimes. So, I just feel like that's it. It's sort of like, if there's just one thing to really take away from, what it's like to live with invisible disability, is you have to then be open to listening to other people's stories and empathizing from their point of view, and not to actually judge them based on, your own incomplete knowledge. Everyone has a lot to learn. I have a lot to learn myself. I'm learning from other neurodivergent people every day too. Yeah. So that's my message.
That's brilliant, Rachel. I love, kind of that, the understanding that we can't erase, the individual's stories. It comes down, it's not kind of, we can't kind of clump things into kind of these big groups anymore. We have to actually kind of really understand the individual story. And so, Tanika, you've started something called the I Am movement, particularly when your son Slade was diagnosed with autism a couple of years ago. And then you quickly realized that being a proud Indigenous woman, that there wasn't really any culturally appropriate supports for you and your family around that. So tell us what you're doing with the I Am movement, and how you're telling culturally appropriate stories for Aboriginal families.
Thanks, Pete. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge country that I'm sharing from today. I'm on Awabakal land in Newcastle in New South Wales. I'd also like to extend this welcome to my fellow Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander family and friends that are listening today as well. So for me, I am not disabled, and I am very conscious every day that I'm just the voice for my son at this point. He's 4, and yeah, it's quite a journey. It's been quite a journey in terms of molding identity, in terms of who we are as people and who we are embedded in our storytelling and our art, and what we already know that we feel from the land every day, that I was trying to mold the diagnosis journey through us as people. So when we talk about the I Am movement, it was to destigmatize that, you know, that you just are disabled. My son actually fits into two categories of statistics, if you like to call them. He is a young Aboriginal boy and he's also disabled. So for me as a mum, I wanted to empower him as much as I could for his future. And along the journey, I've been able to start a podcast as well, where I've been facilitating other stories with families that have children with autism, who see the struggle with accessing therapy in remote communities, for example, accessing the right tools that we feel comfortable and we feel connected to. So I'm really blessed to be on a panel today with you guys as well. So I'm just very grateful for the opportunity to listen and learn from you guys. So thank you.
Thank you, and we're learning from you as well, Tanika. So thanks for joining us. Now, Jerusha, this idea of representation is so important, and our need to see kind of the full spectrum of disability, and as Rachel said before, not to erase stories, but to kind of empathize and listen and understand the full breadth and spectrum of that. Now, I'm interested in your story, Jerusha, because you're a PhD student. You're a lot smarter than I am, studying biomedical science. And one of the things I heard you say is that when you were aspiring to study in this field, that really you couldn't see anyone who looked like you or who was like you. You didn't have those kind of role models that you could look up to. And now you've gone on to receive a grant from our organisation, Cerebral Palsy Alliance, to support you in your studies. But you take this role of being a role model or an advocate really, really seriously. So why is this important, not just for this kind of field of medicine, but also kind of for other industries as well, that the role model kind of aspect of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think being a role model is really important in society. I am really grateful for the opportunity to be one of those role models. And I think some people don't really feel supported. And I am really fortunate to step in those situations and be that voice. And I think that the more diverse the world becomes, the less bias there is. The more inclusive we become, the more accepting we become. So we really need to be a bit cautious with how we talk about disability and how we look at people with a disability. I think people with a disability have a lot to offer in organizations, in hospitals, in schools, in universities, and I would really like to see more people with a disability given a chance to achieve their dreams. And I think that's really, really important, that society is progressive in that matter. And yeah, So that's what I'm really passionate about. And knowing me, I'm really a positive thinker. So I think that helped me in my life. And that's really been my fortress. And yeah. So,
That's
yeah.
brilliant. So well said, Jerusha. And I think, you know, I always say, well, what does the world miss out on when we're not including people who, you know, the full spectrum of humanity? And I think that we all share the desire to be loved and to contribute, to use our gifts and our talents to make a dent on this world. And if there are so many barriers that are placed in someone's way, then I don't believe that we're actually achieving what we can as a society and as a culture and as a world when we put all these barriers in the way. Yeah, it's incredibly well said. Thanks, Jerusha. And I guess each of you have mentioned a part of your story that's been driven by some sense of frustration. I know, Jerusha, you're just saying then that you've got this kind of positivity that is your fortress. But that also indicates to me that there's kind of things that you're also kind of keeping at bay. Tanika, you were, went on at the start, you started the I Am movement really out of trying to trailblaze kind of new ways of allowing the Indigenous culture to be part of this journey and this story. Jerusha, you're obviously trailblazing new pathways in medicine, and you're a representative at UNESCO as part of the Women in Science. Now, Andrew and Rachel, you've both been part of the Remarkable Accelerator in this last 12 months as well. Tell us about your discontent with the status quo, and how that kind of pushed you into thinking that I can actually do something about this, to the point where you joined Remarkable. So I don't know who wants to go first. Rachel, do you want to go first?
Sure. Okay. So thanks, Pete. Yeah. No, Remarkable has been really great for, you know, my business in the sense of just sort of realizing that an idea I had, which was around kind of just sharing stories and reporting on real stories in the science and just simply everyday data people of neurodivergent people, is actually an idea that was not only just a social good, but actually had a real sort of business model behind it, I suppose, in the sense of, you know, my business is about creating those stories and helping organizations communicate those stories better, and having a huge resource base about it. And I guess what sort of, you know, sort of drove me to do that is just, yeah, seeing myself, even as a journalist, working as a journalist, actually not even being represented in the very profession that I love was just devastating. And also just simply, just kind of thinking how easy it is if you just simply stopped and talked to people and represent their stories. They were also more likely to actually fight for the media that they want to see. And so for me, that just really inspired me to kind of think about what do people really need and what can I offer as a service. And that value exchange is, you know, I realized kind of garnered support from not just from the community, the neurodivergent community I'm trying to serve, but also, you know, business leaders and everyone who has been there's all connections, you know, to neurodivergent people, I suppose, in the sense of whether it's their kids, their brother, their sister. It was just so widespread. It just felt like mental health all over again, this sort of open secret that everybody has, or then it's just not talked about until somebody had to take a stand. And so for me, that's what really drove me to kind of go, no, something has to change here. But, you know, I feel like business can be used as a force for good, like Canva would say, the design startup. And I feel like this is what I wanted to do, is not only just create a business to help employ neurodivergent people in my business, so modeling the social change that I want to see in the world as well, and seeing how my employees have really stepped up and seeing their lives change because they were valued for the first time for the work that they're doing, was just a really important driver to do what I do today.
So good. Andrew, what about you?
I'll be really honest. The decision to join Remarkable and the decision to do all of this with Handy was not really I didn't come up with the idea. It was my sister, Heather, who is the co-founder of Handy, and she's not disabled. And we were on a beach in Bondi about almost 3 years ago now, and we were just talking about what what would make my life better. And Heather said to me, well, don't you work in sex and disability? And I said, yeah. And she goes, well, what, can't you just use a regular like sex toy for your need to have your needs met? And I said, Heather, look at my hands. And I showed her my hands. And I said, I'm really disabled. I can't use what's on the market because of my disabilities for self-pleasure. And, I thought that would be the end of it. And she said, we kept walking and she said, well, why don't we make a sex toy? And I went, oh, make a sex toy with my sister? That's weird. But the more and more we look into it and we realized that it was a global problem and that millions of people all over the world live with hand limitations and live with disabilities and couldn't access just their bodies, period, full stop, we realized that it was something that we should draw on. So Heather pushed it forward and said, I want to, join this accelerator and I want to do this. Do you want to do this with me? And I was like, okay, like, sure, cool. And so really I have to give props to my sister, who is, again, not disabled at all, but I love that because the two of us can work together to build something that will help everybody in the long run. It will help people with disabilities receive pleasure. It'll help non-disabled people receive pleasure. And as we get older, disabilities will become a part of our story. So I think it's really cool that this project can bridge the gap between disabled and non-disabled.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. And I love that, granted it was Heather's idea for joining the accelerator, but I love that, in both of those stories, you went, well, actually, no one else is doing this, so I can actually step into that place and we can do something about this. We can actually make some change happen. And I guess we've seen that in each of our panelists' stories today. Now, in a couple of minutes, we want to ask you if there's any questions that you want to ask the panelists. So please jump into, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please use that if you wanted to submit any questions. There have been some people who have submitted some questions prior to today, so hopefully we'll get into those in a second. Tanika, I love the statement that you made. I read in your bio that says you want people to know that as part of the I Am movement, I am unique, I am strong, I am deadly. What's the world missing out on when Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people aren't fully included in society?
Look, I think if I can speak to some statistics to start off with, First Nation children are sitting at 22% living with a disability at this stage. It's twice as likely for an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander child to be diagnosed with a disability. So for me, those stats sit close to my heart in terms of what I am wanting to achieve with sharing those stories, and sharing those stories from a First Nation point of view is really important, because we are so closely embedded into this country that most of the time the way that we have answers is connected to who we are all the time, and it comes back to some feelings and I feel like if anything this world can do is offer First Nations that voice, whether you're in Australia or not. It's enabling us for change, and we are the experts in our own right for change. So yeah, I'm just trying to, like I said in that first question, mold the two together to be that one powerful voice in terms of promoting health and a change for health, but also focusing on those people and those kids that do miss out, not just by being an Aboriginal child, but who's also has a disability, and for their families as well. So that's really important for me to share that, again, from someone that's not disabled, but trying to voice how I see my son, his abilities and his struggles as well. So I'm learning every day as well. So that's probably the beauty of listening to everyone and sharing what I have in my perspective. And I'm also very, very fortunate enough to be guided by some Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander autistic people. So for me, I'm always seeking advice where fits, and I'm not abling, and I'm very much seeking advice where the expertise is as well. So that's important, very important.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely a learning journey for all of us in that. And Jerusha, I've heard you say that you believe it's because of and not in spite of your disability that you'll make an excellent candidate to become a doctor. Tell us how medicine will benefit from Dr. Jerusha Mather.
Yeah, I think my personal experience as a patient would really drive my compassion and really step into what it's like for them, and because I am in this shoes and I can really understand what it's like for them, and I think people with a disability have a lot to bring to medicine, and I have met a lot of great doctors with a disability, and they have really motivated my journey, and I think if I can be that role model for someone else, that would be really great. I really want to be the change, and I really want to see things change. And some people in medicine are really biased, like some doctors are very biased, and I think it's because of there are very few doctors in medicine with a disability, and if we include more in, it would be better for medicine, because we can have a real impact on patients, on even doctors without disabilities. So, and we can really be the voice for change in the area. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, if I was to think about the kind of doctor that I would want to have is someone who does have empathy, who does listen, and as you say, like, you know, you're coming with absolute experience in that space, and so it's about recognizing and responding to that, and not having these barriers. And we haven't got time to kind of go into how the exams for you going into becoming a doctor were so kind of stacked against you that kind of would stop you from becoming a doctor. But you know, if I think about the experiences that you've just talked about, that's the kind of things that I'd want to have in my own doctor, you know. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, Jerusha. Now, we've had some questions come through on the chat, and we've had a few questions come through beforehand as well. So we had Jill from the UK ask, what's one thing an employer could do better to be more inclusive? Rachel, we might ask you to answer that one.
Yeah, I guess speaking to many employers that I do right now, and I should say open-minded employers who genuinely actually are going, I have no idea and I'm actually scared to make mistakes and I don't know what to do. And for them, I kind of say to them, it's about, it really all comes down to patience and understanding, setting aside the 15 minutes to half an hour to figure out what are your communication preferences, you know, how do you best work at home? I want to help you succeed. You know, yesterday I caught up with, you know, one of my old bosses, you know, just to kind of update him how it's going. And, you know, he sort of, you know, I told him I employ 2 employees remotely, you know, I've never met them in person, but like I let them work, you know, the best way they work. And he sort of was like, employees, but, you know, in a sort of joking way, because, you know, he sort of, he managed me when I was undiagnosed with ADHD. And, but, you know, he was totally fine when I said, look, I wanted to just work in a quiet room next door because I can't work in the middle of the office with phones ringing. And he was fine. He was like, okay, just do that for 2 or 3 hours, come back, and working from home. And it's just really comes down to, you know, getting them to understand that if it's about trying to get the most, you know, productive use out of your workforce and, you know, getting the results you really want, you actually treating your employees well is going to be the best way to get there. And so just really asking the person what they really need and coming to an agreement about, you know, what can work and what can't, it's just really the best starting point.
So good. And actually Holly's, we've got a question from Holly Clark saying, how can we improve accessibility for neurodivergent people in the world of remote work? Is there anything you'd like to add to that kind of comment that you've just made?
Yeah, so interesting because, yeah, I sort of did a presentation recently about that kind of remote working. I think it comes back down to, yeah, for remote work, kind of like, yeah, checking in, even checking in during the day. Some people really want like an email update. So being really precise and saying, okay, at 9 a.m., you know, are you able to write 200, 300 words on what you're working on? Or basically, we're going to schedule a meeting, you know, at 1 o'clock every day. And I guess it's good for quite a few autistic people because we want that structure and predictability, and having that sort of slotted in the calendar can really work with that. You know, in terms of like, you know, other remote working sort of ideas, like, you know, even my own ADHD employee, you know, was like saying, so I want my emails and dot points. And I remember sitting down with her and I was like, oh God, all my emails are in long paragraphs. I apologize. I'm ADHD too, but oh God. And so it's kind of like, yeah, it's that, I think everyone sort of has figured this out. Well, is figuring it out now in the pandemic era, right? It's like that constant communication, believe it or not, isn't just good in a pandemic. It's really good for work in general. And so that's really, you know, when I think of those accommodations, you know, it's like, yeah, regular check-ins, you know, always asking employees what they need. If they need extra headphones, pay for that or find a way to expense it. Yeah, just simple everyday things that usually don't cost very much money at all.
It's brilliant. Thanks for that. And Megan from Narara, New South Wales asked, what do you see as the most important changes needed in society for us to fully normalise disabilities of all types? Tanika, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I think it's going back to what Rachel said about listening and learning and then acting. I think it's really important to listen to that individual, what they need, then learning about what the need is and then acting on it instead of being really reactive in a scenario where, you know, something was to happen or someone was to say something to the individual. I think it's really important, especially for the work I do within Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, is to really seek out what the need is instead of what they need from a government point of view or a structured point of view. It's really listening to the families and the people that are in that circle and affected by that disability. And I say affected in the most positive light there. But for me, yeah, it's facilitating the need of listening and really acting on what you've learned. And you can really see that society, that all those people that have learnt and of listening and haven't really gone back and done their own research. So I think that's important.
And Yaniv takes that kind of concept a little bit further and it has asked about Are there any ideas or resources or programs you have seen work as far as raising awareness for disability and building a more inclusive world for school-aged children in Australia? Tanika, have you seen, or the work obviously that you're doing is working somewhat with school children, but have you seen other things as well beyond your own work?
I think it's becoming more aware and more talked about in my world, seeing as I'm looking for it. If I didn't have a son that was on the spectrum, would I be looking for this? Probably not. And that's the reactive side of me that thinks, well, I should already be inclusive in how I look at things. And for me, my niche is very targeted at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. But if I took that lens off, I would need a lot more education around what disability is and the structure of, I'm still very new to the world. So for me, I think to answer that question, it's really seeking maybe local support and asking more, particularly within the school area as well. Just hopefully that helps a little bit, but maybe Rachel or someone else may be able to comment on that, because I'm still looking myself.
Well, I mean, I guess this is it, right? I kind of think, well, why did I start this business again? Is because everyone goes, and so are there any resources? I'm like, well, no, so that's why I had to invent a resource library, right? And so it's like, and then I have to find the right people to actually create those resources, because I guess the biggest point of what I'm doing is I'm going, actually, it's not necessarily a lack of information per se, it's actually the information is in other people's heads that's not actually being communicated in an accessible way for everybody else to benefit with. And it's sort of tapping to that, just marketing expertise. But in terms of that, resource and stuff, I think, speaking from, say, autism, ADHD, like Autism Awareness Australia has kind of done some work, and they're doing they've been funded for a big government project to really go dive deep, especially in that education space. I find YouTube, parent blogs and all that, that's sort of that self-generated resources as well. I'll have to come up with a list sometime. I find those are the ones at the moment for schools as well, like Parents with Advocacy Australia, PAAA for ADHD, they've been the big parent group for that, in terms of talking about inclusion for school age kids. So that's all I can think of, but I guess it's sort of a bit of a chicken and egg scenario that we're talking about here.
So Yaniv, make sure that you subscribe to Rachel's work as well, so that you can see a future list that's coming out around that. We might just have time. I know we're just about out of time. We will go over just by a couple of minutes, but I wanted to ask this question. We had Rosalind from Sydney ask, what are you optimistic about in technology? Andrew, what are you optimistic about in technology?
If I can go a little blue here, I'm optimistic that in 2021, there will be a sex toy formed by disabled people out, and I'm really excited about that because it's a piece of technology that is for and by disabled people and was not adapted from something else. And again, I'm tooting Handy's horn here, but it was not adapted from something else. It was something that was created solely for disabled people by disabled people. So I'm really excited about that because it will show also, even though our toy is a sex toy, it will show other companies you can create something for and by the disabled community with their help. And what I'm really proud of is that from the beginning, Heather and I have worked with disability activists, disability influencers, people on the ground testing our product to see how it would work, and they are disabled individuals. So I think it shows other tech companies that you can do this. It is possible. I mean, we're a startup. So my question then is, why aren't these big tech companies already doing this? Why does this have to be so innovative? I mean, it's great that we're doing it, but shouldn't we be following a larger model that's already been put in place?
And some of the big tech companies are starting to sit up and listen, but you're right, like there needs to be more of that. Like there absolutely needs to be more. Now, one of the last questions we always ask our panelists is, if you were to briefly, this conversation is all about remarkable insights. And so if there was a one-liner from each of the panelists on what's one remarkable insight on seeing the ability and disability? What would that be? Who wants to go first? Tanika, would you like to go first?
This is a very hard question. Remarkable insight. I don't know. This is so hard. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. And I think, you know, we've explored kind of different areas of kind of language and listening and other things. And I don't know if anyone else has any insights that they want to input before we wrap up this session. Anyone else want to put in there? Andrew.
I guess I'll just reiterate what I said at the beginning, which is I hope that after this we see the disability in disability, and we start looking at how being disabled is a powerful force and something we should be celebrating today. I don't think it's something we should be erasing. Again, that doesn't mean that you can't express frustration with it, but it means taking all of that and talking about it.
Absolutely, that's so good, and that might be a great place to stop there. I want you to thank all of our panelists, to Jerusha Mather, to Tanika Davis, Andrew Gerza, and Rachel Worsley. We really appreciate all of your insights and all of your comments today. Also want to thank Kerry Lakeman, our Auslan interpreter. Thank you, Kerry, for joining us today. So Remarkable is about harnessing technology to build social, economic, and physical inclusion of people with disability. And if you're solving a problem in this space, we would really love to speak with you. We want to see how we can support your journey along the way. We now have our expressions of interest open. So if you go to remarkable.org.au/accelerator, hopefully you can remember that. We would love you to express your interest there. Also, if you're not following us on socials, we'd love if you could jump on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram and follow us. Then you can follow all the incredible stories of not just these panelists, but others that we meet along the way as well. Encourage you to do that. We're always looking for feedback on these webinars as well. So if you don't mind filling in the feedback form when you click log out of this one, that would be fantastic. And the recording of this will be made available in the next couple of days. You can go to our YouTube channel for that. This kind of conversation is absolutely vital. We want to continue to share actionable insights that you can take and put into practice to create an inclusive now. And so if you do have your own insights that you want to share, please tag us with #RemarkableInsights. Our next event is actually going to be on smart cities, who benefits? And that's going to be on Wednesday, the 20th of January. So we hope to see you all there. Thank you for joining us. Apologies we went over by 4 minutes, but we hope to see you next time. And thank you again to all of our panelists. Have a great International Day for People with Disability. Bye-bye.